Welcome to the Tomes and Tropes podcast, where books and friendships collide. I'm Becca.
And I'm Keri, and we're two friends who love to talk about books. Today, we are talking about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, Part 7, the last part.
So
I'm
sad.
I'm devastated.
Yeah, this has been quite the journey.
It has. I love it.
Quick reminder that this is an adult book, but we are keeping the adult content to a minimum today.
And spoilers. We will be spoiling the entire book. So since it's the last part, we will be talking about the entire book. So go finish reading and just come back when you're done.
Yep. We're going to move on to our chapter summaries, our one-sentence summaries, where we summarize each chapter in one sentence. As a reminder, these are in chronological order. Part 7 only has 3 chapters, so it's going to be a quick one for you today. Part 7's title, I don't think we've mentioned it yet, is I Remember You.
Chills.
All the feels. Okay. Part 7, Chapter 1, New York City, September 2014. Henry wakes up without Addie and hurries to find the photographs and the notebooks, and he still remembers her.
Chapter 2, New York City, March 2015. With Addie's name on the book Henry has written and his debts paid off, he decides to live his life to the fullest and for the first time isn't scared.
Chapter 3, London, England, February 2016. Addie finds Henry's book at a bookstore and starts to plan how to ruin Luke until he no longer wants her by his side.
Ugh. There's so much.
So much in this part. Actually, there's really not.
No.
There's really not that much.
The things that are in here are just our feelings. All the feels.
Yeah, we just got a lot of confirmations, which is good.
Yeah.
Keri, what did you think?
Part 7 was such a bittersweet part for me. I really wanted to cry both tears of happiness, tears of sadness. I really did love the ending and like how it was so bittersweet, and like we kind of get to imagine what Addie will do over the next, 50 to 300 years to beat Luke, however long that's going to take. I definitely love Henry even more. I just thought this part was really sweet. I am such a Henry gal. I'm Henry stan. I love him. So I like that it didn't end cheesily. I like that it wasn't a happily ever after type of book. Like it didn't.
Yeah.
It wasn't like a rom-com where you know how it's gonna end and everyone's happy and.
Yep.
Yeah. I did like that part, but it reminded me specifically of how I felt when I finished reading the Harry Potter series. Not as strong. Okay. Not as strong, because you can't read that many books in versus one book and have the same reaction. But
yeah,
definitely a similar like happy sigh, maybe some tears, just like, okay, I'm satisfied and I'm happy with all the feels that happened.
Are there 7 books in the Harry Potter series?
I think so. I couldn't remember.
I totally just showed that I've never read Harry Potter.
It's okay.
But I'm reading them now.
You're on the journey. And
I am.
Yeah, 7 books. I just Googled
We're
it.
gonna throw some content for our listeners out about my Harry Potter journey.
You really need to.
It's quite the journey. We're only on book 3, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, you'll be okay. It's so good.
Yeah.
But, Becca, what did you think of part 7?
We got confirmation that Henry was writing this story.
Yes.
So glad. I loved that we got that confirmation. I'm so glad we got one of our theories right. That was like the biggest. We got a lot of confirmations in part 6, but that was the biggest one that I think will affect how we look at this book moving forward, is that like this is Henry writing the story. So I have a couple notes about that later in the episode, but I honestly really liked part 7 a lot. It closed a lot of doors and storylines for me that it gave us a good enough ending that I'm not really wondering what will be next for our characters. I think we can live in our imagination about what Addie and Luke's relationship is going to look like moving forward, but I don't feel like I have to know, right? I don't feel like it's, like you said, I wouldn't call it a happily ever after by any means, but it was a really good resolution, and I felt satisfied by the ending, which was nice. I like when books do that.
I literally, after I finished, I was like, I'm satisfied with my care, like Baymax from Big Hero 6.
Yes.
I was like, thank you, Schwab. I am satisfied with my care. Appreciate you.
100%.
She took us down a roller coaster, and I was happy to be there.
Yeah. And she, like you said, she did it in a way that was not cheesy. And I don't know if I would necessarily call it predictable. I think specifically chapter 3 was not predictable for me. Like, that's not something that we even theorized at all. But I feel like what was predictable with, like, or what we did kind of call was Henry writing this story, and like, that didn't bother me that, like, we called it, like, super early, because we really didn't. I think it was like, what, part 4 or part 5 when we were like, you know, maybe this is a possibility. But yeah, I don't know, I did like that like we got that, like, little bit of confirmation as readers, like, oh, we did get to pick up on something cool.
What's funny is my friend saw that I finished Addie LaRue on my Goodreads, and she texted me, and she's like, oh my gosh, what do you think? So we were talking about it, and she had seen on our podcast, on our social media, that we had guessed that Henry is writing this story, and she's like, I did not see that coming. And I was like, what?
We called it almost right away, like, once he started writing in the notebooks.
So she was like, great call out. So look at us.
Go us.
I know.
But now we're going to move on to our quotables. And as a reminder, these are notable quotes and or parts that we just want to talk about. They are in chronological order. So we're going to go from chapter 1 all the way to chapter 3. We got a far way to go.
A whole chunk. It's definitely better than last week's. Like, chapter 1 through chapter 20.
That was a lot. This is a nice reprieve from all of those chapters.
So nice, not gonna lie. Okay, well, our first quotable is from chapter 1. Hi, Friday.
Friday
I just knew it was her.
Hi. She just, like, elbowed me.
I didn't see her, but I saw the elbow, and I was like, I know she does that. I was like, I had to say hello. Okay, sorry.
No, that's okay. She's
so
cute.
Our
she
first
deserves a hello.
She does. Shout out to Friday.
That's my dog. If anyone doesn't know, my dog is named Friday.
Okay. So our first quotable is from chapter 1. It says, but he has to look, and so he does. And there they are, page after page, written in his slanting script, shielded from the curse by the fact the words themselves are his, though the story is hers. So in this part, I was curious as well if the words would stay too. Like, I wasn't sure if Luke was going to pull a fast one and be like, haha, you can't even have your story. But when he, like, discovered this and, like, reading this quote, I just breathed a huge sigh of relief. Like, I was like, okay, they're still there. That's so good. And because that kind of went along with the theory that we talked about, like, with him writing the story, and I was like, okay, I think we're headed that way, and I'm happy to be in that.
Yeah.
So I really love that this line encapsulates the ending too. Like, the words are his, but the story is hers, and he keeps that through publishing, and, like, he makes sure the credit is all to her. And I just thought that was really sweet, because he definitely didn't have to do that. And then one other thought about this quote, but he reads we gotta do a Hamilton, I'm sorry.
Yes.
He reads like he's running out of time so that he can write like he's running out of time.
Yes.
I know you already did that, I think another part, but had to bring in Hamilton again.
We did so many Hamilton references here.
I'm not mad about it.
Me neither. Okay, so moving on to chapter 2. My quote says, he's spent the last 6 months trying to transcribe the stories in the notebooks to compile them into his draft. And every night after his hands had cramped and his head had begun to ache from staring at the computer screen, he'd collapse into bed. It does not smell like her, not anymore, and wonder how it ends. This whole chapter was such a confirmation, and I know, like, we mentioned it, we've been talking about it a lot already, but, like, we got a theory correct. We're so happy, but this is a confirmation that Henry is writing this story. And I do have some questions based on this, though, based on what we kind of talked about in part 6. Remember, we talked about the chapter in part 6 where he's on the roof and that's where he meets Luke, and then the discrepancy between that and when he meets Luke on the front steps in the rain. Can we trust Henry is a reliable narrator here? And can we trust that Luke is actually the villain here? So I think yes. I think knowing Henry and, like, he wants everything to be true and as factual as he can, and knowing that Addie's, like, brain was such a trap, right, because she can't forget things, I think we probably can. Yeah. However, Luke is the one who stole Addie from Henry. So again, I'm gonna ask, can we trust Henry as a reliable narrator? And can we trust that Addie was actually as, quote, good as she was made out to be this whole story?
I've wrestled with that last question. Like, is Addie as good as she was made out to be? Because I don't think she was. I think she was a very selfish person, which makes what she did in part 6 even more impactful because she took time to be selfless. Yeah. In a way. But she also, again, is using that to, like, fight Luke.
Yep.
So she's kind of being selfish yet again. Although she's, like, giving up. I guess she's starting a new fight with Luke. Yeah. In order to give someone else their life. Yeah. Probably because she's bored, honestly. Yeah. I would be. I don't know. I do trust Henry as a narrator. I think the difference between when he met the Darkness stories could potentially have to do with how many substances he was on. Like, he was taking all the umbrella pills and he was super drunk. So he may not remember everything correctly and, like, bits and pieces. So he may have, like, ended up on the roof. And we just don't know how that goes because he probably doesn't fully remember.
Yeah, that's fair.
But I don't know. I feel like Luke could be a good guy. I'm not on the full boat of Addie being a villain, though.
Yeah, I don't think I'm in that boat either. And we'll talk about that more later, too. But I don't think I'm in the boat that Addie was a villain. And I'm not really in the boat that Luke wasn't a villain. I just think, like I said, we have this new information. We have that confirmation that it is Henry writing this story. Should we be looking at this differently now?
That's a good point. I also have a quotable from chapter 2.
Ooh.
This, I'm gonna it's not an exact quote. Like, I skip over some parts because you don't need to hear the narration. But just make sure you thank me in the acknowledgments. This is B talking. My thesis. Remember, I wanted to do it on the girl in those pieces. The ghost in the frame. That's her, isn't it? And I just love this callback to B's thesis and her recognizing it even though she doesn't get the whole picture. But, like, I think she probably thinks that Henry was inspired by those and wrote the story based on that. But I know he says, like, I wish I could tell her that it was real. Like, it all is real.
Yeah.
And I love that he's, like, having this conversation with B and being able to share it with B, even though he can't say it's real because I don't think she'll believe him.
Yeah.
So it's a great callback to all the art pieces we've done.
Yeah.
Too. So, but moving on, my next quotable is from chapter 3. It says, she closes her eyes and sees him as he was that first day in the store, elbows leaning on the counter as he looked up and frowned at her behind his glasses. I remember you. Ugh. The I remember you will always get me. From that first time we heard it, I was like, I love it. Love you, Henry. But he keeps his promise to remember her. In the end of part 6, she makes him promise that he will remember her, and she doesn't specify how or anything, but he keeps his promise, and Addie knows that he remembers and kept that promise based on the book that she found and how the acknowledgement was for her. I remember you. And I found this so romantic.
Aww.
I was like, this is so sweet. But I have been such a Henry and Addie stan, and I won't apologize for it. Yeah. I did kind of like her and Luke for a little bit, but I don't know. He's a god, and it's just weird a little bit.
Yeah, I would agree.
But this is her mark on the world, like the book, and one that is so explicitly her. And we'll talk about this in Timeless Treasures later, but this book, if it were one of the art pieces like we had at the beginning of the parts, it would be the clearest one, the most impactful one.
Yes.
So we can count that as an art piece, but that makes it over 7. So we're not, because I like 7s.
Yeah, I like it. Okay, so I also have one from chapter 3. And it says, she begins to read, makes it as far as her first winter in Paris when she feels the air change at her back, hears the name like a kiss at the nape of her neck. I think this whole chapter is really interesting, all of chapter 3. We get so many throwbacks to the story that we've just been reading. So we get the throwback to her winter in Paris, and we get like all of the things before that, and I just really loved that we got a lot of throwbacks in chapter, like this final chapter, to highlight the things that we've kind of gone through emotionally as readers through the rest of the book. But I do want to highlight 2 things that changed my perspective a little bit and kind of just talk through them. So the first one is the quote, name like a kiss. So we get very few kissing scenes in this book, and they're all significant. We get like Henry and Addie's first kiss, and we get like her kiss with Remy, but I do think that the kisses with Luke are the most significant throughout the story. So
for sure. Like
when Luke and Addie first meet, they kiss to confirm the deal, and they kiss to confirm the second deal, right? When they and it's the same way both times, right? He draws blood both times. But I want to throw back to the second kiss that starts their quote relationship, and it's described as somebody kissing. It says he kisses her like someone tasting poison, and we talked about this in part 6. But I think this was such a big foreshadowing, because at the end of this book, this is what she becomes for him, is this poison. And like he doesn't know that she's a poison in his life, and sometimes like that's why poison is so effective, because you don't know that it's there, but it like slowly eats away at you. So I just thought that was so interesting that that was such a big foreshadowing. But I think this quote specifically is saying like it's a kiss at the nape of her neck, and I'm pretty sure that's how Luke that's like how when he first said her name, that's how she felt at the same time. So very interesting parallels there. Now, secondly, I want to point out that the end of Addie's story is so similar to the beginning of her story.
Ooh.
At the beginning of her story, the main reason she makes a deal with Luke is to get out of marrying Roger. She doesn't want to belong to somebody else. So she makes this deal with Luke to get out of belonging to Roger. But the second deal she makes, and like the ending of this book, is also a deal to get out of belonging to somebody, right? And it's kind of backwards, because she really does belong to Luke, and like she will, but it's only as long as he wants her, which means she doesn't actually like belong to him, right? It's just like something, it's just she's there, but she's like, as soon as he doesn't want her anymore, she'll be gone. So I just loved the parallels there, that we got the beginning of the story and the ending of the story were both for Addie to like get out of this relationship that she doesn't want to be in.
That's such a good call out. That completely went over my head. Dang. My mind is blown.
Good.
See, this is why I don't read our notes beforehand.
Good.
So I can be mind blown.
Keri, what's your favorite quote?
Oh, it is from Henry.
Okay.
Or like towards the end of the book where they're talking about Henry. It says, "After all, life seems very long sometimes, but he knows it will go so fast, and he doesn't want to miss a moment." So good.
Nice. That's kind of similar to your part 6 quote, isn't it?
It is. I'm just in that groove, I guess. That's what's been standing out to me.
Nice. Yeah. My favorite quote is, "That is the thing about living in the present and only the present. It is a run-on sentence." And Henry was a perfect pause in the story.
Oh, I did love that quote.
Yeah.
Oh, Henry.
It was just so sweet.
So sweet. Ugh.
Okay.
Okay.
So for our next little section, instead of recapping the whole book in our timeline, we felt that may be a little bit too long and too much, especially since we really only got 3 new situations here, and they were significant, but they weren't like significant actions. So instead of doing that, Keri and I thought it would be fun to do a psychological analysis piece, and this is just to like wrap up the story. So I chose to do our psychological analysis on our main character, Addie LaRue. And today we're just going to dig into what she kind of went through and how this mental health could potentially be represented in Addie LaRue. As always, these psychological analyses are meant to be fun and bring some light to some psychological states that are reflected in books. I have a master's in psychology. Keri has a master's in psychology. This is not something we take lightly, but it is meant to be fun and just show some representation. This is in no way meant to analyze anybody who's actually like a living, breathing human, as that could be harmful. So just quick disclaimer there. We're here for the fun.
All the disclaimers.
Yeah, we're here for the fun of the literary characters. So, okay, so I kind of came into this psychological analysis a little bit different than we originally did with the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes. So I kind of had an idea of the disorder that we were going to talk about today, and used Addie's life to kind of show the disorder rather than like saying that she has a specific disorder. So instead of truly doing analysis, we're going to more do a deep dive onto the psychological disorder that we're talking about today, and that is Stockholm Syndrome.
Ooh.
I also want to highlight that most of this information comes from clevelandclinic.org, and as a warning, this topic may be a little bit harmful or traumatic for young listeners, so please proceed with caution, and if you get uncomfortable, please skip ahead about 5, maybe 10 minutes, depending on how much Keri wants to chime in, because it is a little bit, it could be a little bit uncomfortable. Okay, so this syndrome was coined Stockholm Syndrome in 1973 when captives during a bank robbery began sympathizing with the bank robbers. So basically what happened is robbers went into a bank and they kept the people inside the bank as captives for about 5 days. And the captives started sympathizing with the bank robbers, and like there was a lot that happened But they started raising money for like their court defense, and like it was just a very interesting situation, that like they just didn't view them as like these bad people anymore. They really began to view them and sympathize with them. So as a reminder, this happened in 1973, and so this is a relatively new syndrome, and it hasn't been studied very much because it's so new and it's very rare. So to start off with, Stockholm Syndrome is a psychological response to being held captive or being in an abusive situation. And in these cases, similar to the captives in the bank robbery, victims begin to sympathize with their captors and in some cases form a very strong bond with them. This bond begins to form as a protective response to help the victim get through the days, weeks, months of being in this situation. The main symptom here is those positive feelings towards the captor or abuser, but can also carry over to negative feelings towards like other authority figures. So like police, lawyers, maybe their rescuers, like the victims could have negative feelings towards those people. And there are a few closely related psychological phenomenon as well. So learned helplessness, trauma bonding, and battered person syndrome are all very closely related. And so is PTSD. So a lot of symptoms of Stockholm Syndrome are very similar to someone who has PTSD from a traumatic, abusive, or captive situation. This is an extremely rare psychological phenomenon. Stockholm Syndrome is not just going to happen because somebody is captive or somebody is abused. It has to be the right person not the right person. It has to be a specific person in a situation that's going to trigger this. So there's not a lot of research on it because it is so rare and it is so new. So there's not a ton, but there's enough that we kind of know what I just laid out. Okay, so now we're out of the information section. After going through all that, I think the relationship between Addie and Luke could be considered Stockholm Syndrome. If you think about it, Luke does put Addie through a form of like captivity, right? He's the only one who knows her name. And she questions her sanity multiple times because of that. And you do notice throughout the book, she starts to have these positive reactions to him and feels relief when seeing him and all those things. So we do get some of those notes. Mm-hmm. He's the only one who says her name for 300 years. And he saves her from multiple situations. So even though he's like her captor, he still saves her from situations. I'd like to specifically call out in part 6 when they're at the bar and she tells, like, that's the part when she tells him, like, I'd rather be a ghost than spend time with you. But she was relieved to see him when she turned around and, like, saw that it was him. So, yeah. Now, with all of that, Addie never really gets to the point where she sympathizes with Luke's beliefs. She never gets to the point where she does have positive feelings towards him, but she doesn't sympathize with him, right? It's more just like, I would call their quote relationship a relationship of convenience for both of them, but mostly for Addie, right? Because she really, what else does she have?
True.
And she may put off his beliefs during their relationship, but she doesn't really ever sympathize with them or agree with them. She also has the ability to think clearly enough to try and destroy Luke at the end of the book. So while the relationship could be considered Stockholm Syndrome, at the end of this, after looking a little bit deeper, I'm going to argue here that this is not Stockholm Syndrome. This is just good old-fashioned toxic relationships.
It's very much like the toxic ex relationship we talked about last time. We got to learn about Stockholm Syndrome. I didn't know anything about that.
Yeah. It's really interesting. It happens this is definitely adult content, so if you are uncomfortable, please fast forward. But Stockholm Syndrome is mostly present, and most of the research that's been done on it has been through victims of human trafficking. And once they get older, then they become part of like the trafficking ring. Or like if you think about like a brothel, right? Like typically it's like the older woman who like helps nurture the younger women. That older woman typically, like, that's where a lot of those symptoms come from, because she was a victim. She knows what it's like to be a victim there, but she has been in that situation for so long that she starts sympathizing and like starts having those negative feelings towards police and like authority figures too. So that's where most of the research has come from. That did not, just so everybody knows, that did not come from clevelandclinic.org. I don't know where that came from. I did a research project.
Come from your brain.
Yeah, I did a research project on Stockholm Syndrome for my AP Psych class in high school, and that's just something that stuck with me. So
that's impressive that you remember.
Yeah. But anyways,
great job.
That's Stockholm Syndrome
Thanks for sharing. Thank you for sharing. That was so good.
You're welcome.
All right, with that, we are going to enter our timeless treasures. This is our final art piece for Addie LaRue. So here we go. I'm going to read it from the book real quickly. So the title of the piece is The Girl That Got Away. The artist is unknown. The date is 2014. The medium is Polaroid. The location is on loan from the personal archives of Henry Strauss. Description: collection of 6 photographs depicting a girl in motion, her features erased, obscured, or otherwise unreadable. The final photo is different. It features a living room floor, the edge of a table, a pile of books, only a pair of feet visible at the bottom. The background is the subject of the photos remains a topic of intense speculation, given the author's relationship to the source material. The flash has erased all meaningful details, but the medium is what makes the pieces remarkable. In standard photography, long exposure would make it possible to achieve the desired effect of motion, but the Polaroid's fixed shutter speed makes the illusion of movement all the more impressive. Estimated value: it's not for sale. All works currently on display at the Modern Museum of Art exhibit In Search of the Real Addie LaRue, curated by Beatrice Caldwell, PhD, Columbia.
Go B!
We love that for B. That was like the best surprise. I didn't read the art piece until the end because I was like, I think I'm gonna need that. And I did. That was like the perfect little surprise at the end. I was like, go B. I feel like she's our friend too now. But this is where the essence of Addie is captured, as what it said. So this is what makes the art piece so significant in the art world, because the motion that is created is unlike any motion that a photographer has been able to achieve before. My sister took a bunch of photography classes, and I was trying to do like motion stuff. I was always trying to help her by like throwing things or something so she could practice. It was a great time. So I know like that's really hard, and we know why like he was able to make it that way. Mm-hmm. But the art world and the photography world is like, holy cow, this is so cool. So we love that. Go Henry.
Go Henry.
But Henry has captured Addie in such a way. Like we know the story of how he was capturing her, and we just love this piece of art. The other 6 art pieces that Addie has inspired, as well as the book that Henry writes, captures her as not as someone who is forgotten or as a ghost, but as a human, what she never thought she really was. And I think Henry really made that humanity part of her stand out, especially in his art pieces, we'll call it, the book and the photography. Yeah. So shout out to Addie, shout out to Henry. These art pieces were so good. Good job, B, for getting your PhD at Columbia. Impressive.
Yes.
You go girl.
Amazing.
But yeah, that's our last art piece.
So sad.
I know.
Okay, so moving on to the 7s. We only got one addition to the 7s in this part, and we're going to read down the list really quickly. So we have 7 freckles on her face, 7 parts in the book, 7 loves she will have, 7 lives she will lead, 7 gods watching over her, 7 stars on the cover of the book, 7 art pieces at the beginning of each chapter, and 7 languages. So as a reminder, we got confirmation of 8 languages in part 5. We're going to go back on 7 gods watching over her because we only have Luke, so that's not really a 7 anymore. And then the 7 lives she will lead. I'm interested, Keri, what your thoughts are on this, because last week you and I had a little bit of a disagreement about lives. And I'm interested to see if you think this is going to be, if we're going to disagree on this as well. I think in part 7, we got our last life of Addie after Henry. So I think her making the additional deal with Luke and her goal moving forward to destroy him is our 7th life. I am going to argue that her England life that we had talked about before from the cottage is not going to be a life. That this is going to be our 7th life. But what do you think?
I would agree. And I think very similar to the France situation where we go back to France so many times and she goes back to France so many times, we can kind of loop that England past life into this new life in a way. So just it was probably similar to Germany where she had a little bit of a life but not such a significant life. So I would agree. I thought about it when we were talking. I was like, it's very similar to the France thing where we constantly went back to Valon and kept. Yeah, I think I agree with that.
Cool. Okay. Well, that is all for part 7. So for those of you who have been with us since the beginning, you know that at the end of a book, we also do a tour de Tome. So we are going back, reflecting on the whole book and giving our ratings of it. And our ratings are on 6 different topics. These topics are plot, character development, writing style, recommendability, overall rating, and gut feeling. And just as a reminder, gut feeling is how you feel when you close the book, when you read the ending. So
she has to clarify that because I had to text her yesterday and be like, what was good gut feeling again?
Yes. So Keri and I will both be giving our ratings on both of them. And we're going to be starting with plot. So Keri, do you want to go first?
Yes. And just a quick note for in the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes, when we rated, we did Mockingjays. So we're doing 5 out of 5 rings for this one. Yes. So super fun. We couldn't decide between watch or rings. So you get rings. Yep. Yeah, because you get rings the whole book. So yeah. All right. So plot. I'm going to give this a 4. I felt like at times there could have been just more going on. We talked a lot about like real world parts like Beethoven, Sinatra, Joan of Arc. I think that was meant to be clever. I just thought it was really disjointing and a little hard for me to get past, which is why I'm not giving it a 5.
Yeah.
But what's your rating?
Yeah, no, I did the same thing. I gave it a 4. I wanted to give it a 5, but my reasoning for giving it a 4 was the real world scenarios too. So completely agree. So now for character development, I'm going to give this a 4. And I'm surprised by this rating because we had talked a couple times about how, like, Keri and I off the podcast had talked a couple times about how, like, I didn't know if I liked the characters in this book. And that was a little hard. But I was really leaning towards a 3 or a 3.5 here until the very end. And the reason this got a 4 was because we got a transition for 2 characters, and Addie's growth from being the victim at the very beginning to the villain in Luke's story at the end, and then vice versa with Luke starting off as the villain and then switching to the victim, the unknowing victim. those two character developments completely like changed my thought process. Had we not gotten the last chapter, we probably would have been at a 3 or a 3.5, but that last chapter just really solidified that for me. Yeah. Other than that, didn't think there was too much growth, especially like Addie, like she kept going back to her hometown, and that just was like,
yeah,
come on, girl.
Girl.
Yeah. Keri, how about you?
When you said when you said that she's the villain in Luke's story, I immediately thought of Burr. Nails it.
Yes.
And I'm villaining your history.
Yes.
Yes, 2 Hamilton references in 1 episode. I'm on fire.
We're killing it. You're killing it.
I love it. Thank you. But for character development, I rated this a 3, which I'm very surprised that I tend to overrate things because I don't want to feel bad, but I do feel like I may have been a little harsh here, but I really think Addie, like you said, could have been developed more as a character. She developed some, especially in the beginning parts. And because our main character didn't have as much character development as I would have liked, I am giving it that hard 3. Henry had some growth towards the end of the book, which I talked about last part, and Luke did as well, but it all felt very rushed in the development pattern, specifically for Luke. I felt like, okay, oh my gosh, he's developing really fast. Okay. So like we go to knowing nothing about him to everything. Yeah. And I think that's fine for the story. So I'm not dissing that at all. I think it was fine as a reader. Yeah. I think we weren't able to see the growth in Henry or Luke really, because like Henry was dying and we didn't know that he was dying so quickly. So yeah. It had to happen for the 2 guys. But I feel like Addie, and I've seen this a lot on reviews, like Addie didn't really do a lot. Yeah. Like you said, she kept going back to France in her hometown, but that's okay. I still loved it. But writing style, what are we thinking?
Yeah. Do you want to go first?
Yeah. So 5 for sure. 5 out of 5 rings. Writing style was unmatched. Yep. I could talk about this one all day, but I won't because I think we talked about it enough in this podcast. Yeah. But what do you think?
Yeah. No, I gave this a 5 for sure. I think we talked about it too much on the podcast of how good of a writing style there was to not give it a 5. So, yes.
We did. Schwab, you killed us.
Yes.
It was great. Thank you. All right, gut feeling. Go ahead.
Yeah. So I gave this a 4.2, and when I was
that's so specific.
Yes. We were honestly leaning towards like a 3.8 until the last chapter. Again, it's a little bit more than a 4 because of Addie becoming the villain and Luke becoming the victim. Like those 2 things really kind of made it a little bit better for me. But I also kind of called that Henry was writing the story, so like that wasn't too much of a surprise. And yeah, I just like I think it would have been a 3.8. The other thing here too is like this book didn't really make me cry. We did have a lot of emotional things, but like I've read books before where I've just like sat on my couch and like stared off into space for 30 minutes. Like it needs
Iron Flame.
Yeah. That's what it's gonna need for me to be at a 5. And so we're leaning 3.8, 4.2 ish. How about you, Keri?
Okay. I, again, overrating 5 because I was just so happy when I finished this book. Like, I just literally hugged it. I do that when I love books. I just, like, give them a little hug because I'm like, thank you so much. Like, I think I even got that on video. Like, we recorded ourselves reading the last part, and we didn't know what was going to happen, so we didn't know we probably wouldn't have very much reaction. Yeah. But I felt full. Like, I felt, like I said, satisfied with my care. which hasn't happened in a lot of books recently for me. Like obviously with Fourth Wing and Iron Flame, like I was just like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to read the next one.
Yeah.
But I feel like I also learned or was reminded of things about life and what life really means, and to be careful what you wish for, because things you may already have can be taken for granted. And I wonder if that was Schwab's purpose in this story.
Yeah.
And I just loved that it was a book that not only I enjoyed and felt connected with the characters, but like that I left feeling like something deeper I learned, which was really good.
Yeah.
Props to Schwab.
Definitely. Recommendability. Keri, will you be recommending this book?
100%. 5 out of 5. I've already been recommending this book since part 2. So,
Yeah.
so good.
Yeah. Same here. 5 out of 5 for sure.
So good.
Overall rating.
All right. Let's do overall rating. You want to go first?
Yeah. I gave this a 4 out of 5. This was not a 5-star read for me. It was a great book and I enjoyed reading it, but again, it wasn't 5 stars. It just, I don't know. It was a good book and I liked it, but it wasn't like, it didn't blow me away. So we're 4 out of 5 rings. How about you, Keri?
I'm going to do 5 out of 5 rings. I think that it's going to be a real interesting time when we finally get a book that I don't rate 5 stars. So, I really like rating books 5 stars. I'm like the same way with like Airbnbs and stuff. Like, it has to be really horrible. Like, the Airbnb I just stayed at wasn't great, and I gave it a 3 stars, and Jesse was like, wow, you actually rated something like a normal person. Anyways, well, yeah, like I said, I'll probably rarely rate a book I end up with an emotional connection with lower than a 5.
Okay.
I love this book. It's unlike anything I've really read before. I really enjoyed it from start to finish, and I just loved V. Schwab's writing, and will definitely be reading more of her books. And I know we probably will end up reading another one of hers on the podcast eventually.
Yeah, I would agree. Well,
that's our tour de Tome.
Okay, so on to our weekly recs. This week, my recommendation is a cookbook by Brittany Williams. It's an instant loss cookbook called Eat Real, Lose Weight. Her story is just amazing. She lost like over 100 pounds just eating real food, but I love her cookbook, and it teaches you how to use an Instant Pot, which was my recommendation from last week. So definitely recommend.
I just now realize that your recommendation is like about eating real and losing weight, and my recommendation is literally ice cream. Oh my god. I like didn't even realize that last night.
That's hilarious.
So here is the delicious ice cream I was eating while making this outline the other day. So it is the Publix Banana Foster limited edition ice cream flavor. So if you are near a Publix and you like bananas and you like banana ice cream, or you like deliciousness, definitely recommend this. It's a banana ice cream with rum swirls. It is delightful.
It sounds delicious.
I'm a Moose Tracks girly. Like, I love Moose Tracks. And this I would give as my second choice, which is saying a lot because I really love a lot of ice creams. So
nice.
I am a banana girl, though, so I am very biased when it comes to banana flavors.
I love it.
But yeah, Publix Banana Foster ice cream. If you live near Publix, go get it and maybe buy me one too.
Bring it over.
Yes. I'll have to fly up with it for you, Becca.
Yes.
All right. But thank you so much for listening to us today. For more content, make sure to go follow us on Instagram and TikTok at Tomes and Tropes Pod. We're pretty funny, so you should definitely come check us out.
We're hilarious.
I like laugh at my own stuff half the time. But if you have any thoughts about this episode or this book, email us at tomesandtropespod@gmail.com or send us a instant message on TikTok or Instagram. We'd love to hear from you.
Yeah. We'd love to hear your thoughts on what you thought about The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue and what you want to see in our next book. We'll see you next week. Stay curious.
Keep reading and craft your own story.